Good morning, CLC. Thank you for your presence, your love, your energy and support. In this moment, at this time, I invite you to venture with me beyond the beyond to that sacred space where you become the I am. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice deep cleansing breath in. And as you breathe out, let go of anything that does not belong in this sacred space. Any doubts or tension, stress or anxiety, just release it into the ethers for now. Go ahead and take another nice deep cleansing breath in. And as you breathe out, allow your body to relax in this moment and allow your mind to be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself up to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one very special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This could be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in this room or even on this planet anymore. I turn to that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in this room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
Before I get started, we look ahead much of the time in what we're doing here. We look within, we look ahead. Today we're going to look back for a minute. It was 5 years ago this weekend that we shut down for COVID. 5 years ago this weekend. And most of you know this story. Most of you watching have heard the story from me 2 or 3 times in classes and online groups and stuff. But I got to tell it again. And it was I happened to be out of town that weekend speaking and teaching, and Reverend Lisa Ryan was to give her first ever Sunday talk that weekend. And we, as it happened, she gave that talk, deciding at the same time to have us go virtual in addition to actual, because we didn't know actual was going to go away for a while, had us on Facebook and gave her first ever Sunday talk on Facebook Live to the universe. And I have told her since, and everyone else who would listen, had that been me when I was starting out in ministry, I would have been petrified. And she stood and delivered, and it was what it was. Then we didn't know what we were going to do. When I got home, and it was weird, and you remember how it was that, particularly that in that cusp of time where nobody knew anything. I mean, everything was infected. You couldn't touch a thing, and you couldn't lean on a lamppost, because it was like people were disinfecting boxes that came in the mail, and we just didn't know. And I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people come to me and say, whatever you need us to do for the duration of this Sunday morning wise, we will do. And they did. And they were in the room every week. They were in the room when at times we were being told we shouldn't even drive here. The county and stuff was pretty militant about it. And that was Lisa and Danielle and Brian and Melody and Mel Tipton and Mary Radspinner and Jeffrey Oshman, who were in the room. And Theo, thank you, and Theo, and Reverend David, who were all here in the room, and this little group, and so we really got to know each other, because we were working together, and we had no idea if anybody was watching out there, but we got up here and we sang our songs and gave our talks and all like that, and
the comments started.
Say it again?
And then the comments started.
And then the comments started, and then we knew. And And so I just want to thank you all who braved the course with us and made this happen, and those of you who stayed in the Creative Life family, and those of you who found the Creative Life family as a result of this, because you were holed up and you thought, well, let's see what else is going on out there. So thank you for being here then. Thank you for being here now. Now on with today, which has to do with appearance and reality, and I'm pulling some of these ideas out of Emmet Fox's work for no other reason than the golden key came up a couple of times in conversation in the last few months, and that got me to thinking about his work generally and so on. And I'm very aware of the fact that it's Women's History Month, but I don't like to just confine stuff to whatever the calendar tells me we should do. So women's history infiltrates everything that we do here, and you'll hear a lot more about that as we go along, just like Black history does. Just like the alternative history that you and I are creating through the work that we're doing here. We're creating an alternative viewpoint in the world that says there is a power greater than we are, yet right where we are, and we can use it, and we can be used by it for constructive purposes. So looking at what Emmet Fox had to say about appearance and reality, if you'll think back a few months, we were talking about the absolute and the relative, and it shakes out pretty much the same thing. The reality is the absolute, the I am, the changeless. The appearance is everything else. The appearance is what we perceive, and what we perceive is largely a function of our perceptive filters. You're aware of this, right? It's largely the effect of the beliefs that we have created within ourselves up to that point through which we are viewing the world. Life turns up to us pretty much as we expect it to. And this is to reveal to us the power of our own expectation. When you read metaphysical writers saying things like, for example, Emma Hopkins said that the world will persist in exhibiting before you what you persist in affirming the world is. That's not a threat. That's not she's not weaponizing that statement. What it means is the world will persist in doing that to get your attention, to make you aware of the fact that you're using a constructive power, possibly destructively, or most usually miscellaneously. I just made that word up. Miscellaneously. We're using this power. We're using it because we're not intentional about it. We're not aware of this. And so Emmet Fox, in a very simple, direct way, talks about choosing your thoughts, choosing positivity over negativity when faced with a situation. You say, this could go either way. Well, which way do you want it to go? Which way is the best way for it to go for all parties concerned, and can you imagine that, and can you imagine the outcome that you wish to create? Can you imagine the outcome you wish to create? And I don't know why, but we shy away from that so often. Because we've been trained that it's more useful to nest in the problem, and how the problem got here, and whose fault it is, and how big the problem is, and how long it's been here, and what we're going to have to sacrifice as a result of the problem, and on and on. We dwell on this thing rather than look at what we would put in place of it. And I get real tired of being yelled at by the culture, don't you? And I was watching, frankly, some other spiritual centers, and it struck me that what I was watching, and I was watching this through my perceptive filter, which is there is no spiritual center on earth better than this one. But, you know. You want me to think that way, don't you? Instead of like, well, we're in 17th place this week or something. No. But I was watching, and it struck me that the ministers were kind of yelling at their congregations about, you people don't care enough. You people don't care enough. There's more you should be doing. This is a suffering world. And a couple of them trotted out statistics. And they said there are 3.4 million people who are suffering this, and there's 175,000 over here who are suffering that. And all of this, I'm sure, is accurate as far as statistics go. But I can get that on my news feed. In fact, I'd seen a couple of these numbers, I think, fairly recently, and it's like, okay, that's good. And I thought, I don't think people at Creative Life come here every Sunday to hear me read the news, or the sports, or the weather, for that matter. I think you come here for something else. It's like, okay, what would we put in its place? You don't come here to hear my political opinions. You don't come here to hear my economic opinions, my personal ones, I mean, about how things are and whose fault it is and how they got that way. I think you come here to join me and each other in a vision of possibility of how things could be. How would it be if 3.4 million people that we know of on this planet today were thrilled? How would it be if 175,000 people got everything they ever wanted? How would it be if dreams came true across the landscape? How would it be if... So alternatively, I'm thinking watching television a little bit. There's these ads, because it's spring break, right? There's these ads for Disneyland. This has been going on in Disney World and Disney properties generally. It's been going on for the last few weeks. And it's a little late to book travel now, but you still could, you know. And they show all these children like lying awake at night with eyes wide open because the next day the family's leaving for Disney World, you know, and they just, and then you think to yourself, oh, Disney World, it's an industry, it's the mouse, you know, it's the, right, it's the House of Mouse, and and it's all about making money, and it costs a fortune to take a family down there, and it's blah, blah, blah. That's all grown-up stuff. And we wonder why it is everything looks sad and kind of sags in the middle and kind of, you know, when the child knows none of that and just wants to ride the rides and meet the mouse and do whatever it is you do at Disney World, you know? So my point here is that if we could focus more on, through the eyes of a child, focus more on the kind of reality that we wish to create, we wouldn't have to yell at each other about not doing enough. We would celebrate what everybody's doing, we'd celebrate what everybody's up to, and we'd sit with them when they're confused, and we'd not try to pile on with answers. Just sit there and be with one another and say, okay, so I don't understand some things either about this life. But there is love. There is compassion. There is empathy. There is taking care of one another. We're doing the best that we possibly can. And you know what that manages to do? Is it brings the absolute into the relative. Because how often have you heard, since you were basically born, that God is love? Whatever religion you were raised in, even if your people had no religion at all, they somewhere trotted out the idea to you probably that God is love. And that's the absolute of it. So when you're feeling love, when you're feeling drawn to the reality that you wish to create and you're loving on that reality, when there's simpatico there and so on, you're living in a godlike kind of way, a godly kind of way. You're living up to your spiritual inheritance. That's how we do this. And I'm not saying that there aren't problems on this earth. There are. There are a lot of them. I know this. There are personal problems in individual lives. You never know how much pain another person might be in. There are collective problems. There are social problems. I don't like a lot of what's happening. And it may be the same parts of what's happening that you don't like, or it may be different parts because everybody has their own take on all of this. But what I know to do, because I've done it, and I've watched others do it, and I had others teach me how to do it, who I was watching do it themselves, because you want that in the teachers. You want somebody who you can watch them do it. It's not all, as they say, classroom. Some of it's behind the wheel, like driver's ed, you know. So what it is that I want you to consider joining me and each other in doing is picking a problem, and we did this exercise similarly a little while ago. Pick a problem or 5 on the planet and imagine what you would put in its place. And try not to let your mind wander off that question of what you would put in its place. Try not to let your mind wander back to whose fault it is and how long it's been here and what all terrible things are going to happen if it continues. Try to rein your mind in and bring it back to the point, and you can do this. We can do this. It's the same as any kind of focus. It's the same as if you're reading a book and your phone rings and you deal with the conversation, and you go back to the book and you have to look back. Now, where did I leave off? And you pick back up with the plot of the story, right? This is how we guard our minds. This is how we post a sentinel at the door of our minds. This is how we manage our interior process. And so you look at life and you imagine, what would I put in its place? There's hunger. I'll give you one statistic or one thing I read in the paper. They're cutting way back on funding for food banks, for serving particularly children through food banks. This strikes close to the heart of who we are as a center, because we've been involved with the local food bank for years and years and years. Okay, so I can get all mad about that. I can go cast my votes about that. I can even paint a sign and go picket someplace about that. And that will have some function, I suppose, some use. Might persuade somebody. Somebody might look at my sign and say, you know what, you're right, let's change everything. But probably what's going to happen is not that. Probably what's going to happen is this. Enough people are going to get together and they're going to focus on what does a well-fed child look like. How does a well-fed child operate? How does a well-fed child learn in school? How does it affect their behavior, their growth, and their view of going on into adulthood and how this world works, their self-worth and so on? How does it affect that? And how does it affect their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors and their school and on and on? And picture a systemic. You hear of systemic breakdown, you hear of systemic racism, and you hear of systemic homophobia. Well, how about systemic wellness and wholeness? Picture a systemic wholeness. How could this look? How could this look if instead of just people not getting enough, people had more than enough, people had so much, they didn't have to think about how much they have? Wouldn't that be great? That's a wonderful definition of prosperity. To me anyway, a wonderful definition of prosperity is you don't have to think about money. You want something, you get it, but you're not driven, you're not compelled to get it. You don't have to get it to prove something to anybody else or raise your self-worth. Why? Because you already have self-worth. It's just like you go in a restaurant to eat. You don't have to order everything on the menu just because you can afford to. And they're emptying the kitchen and then they're bringing it all out to you and all sits there and goes to waste because you can only eat so much. You know, that's crazy, right? But that's a lot of times how we approach life from a lack-based perspective. Or here's maybe a less gruesome example. Somebody says, I don't know. People don't really come right out and say this, but let's imagine they did. Somebody comes up to you and says, I'd like to be your friend. And you say, great. Then here are my rules for friendship. First thing is, you answer to me now. Okay, every choice you make, you run it by me. I don't want you being friends with other people. I will consider that disloyal and a betrayal. I want you to agree with every one of my opinions. I want you to be there constantly for me, but understand when I can't be there for you. Right? That's kind of twisted, isn't it? You know, but what is it saying? It's saying the person that holds that sort of viewpoint about that, as they speak of in codependency work, it says you don't have friends, you take hostages. Okay? You don't have relationships, you take hostages. It's saying that the person who advances that kind of opinion has very low self-worth. And just putting one more friend in their life or one more human in their life isn't going to heal that. They've got to do some inner work first, okay? Or they're just going to accumulate dysfunctional relationships. Until we deal with the absolute and our relationship with the absolute, we kind of mess up in the world of the relative. So how would it be if you knew you were loved? And you didn't need everybody to constantly prove it to you? How would it be if you knew you were loved? If you knew you were valued, if you knew you were cherished, how would it be if you knew that everyone else knew that they were loved and cherished? How would it be, as we speak of, if everyone knew they had a choice? And I bring that up because a lot of times we'll say, well, I don't know what to treat about, meaning I don't know what to pray about in this other person's life because I haven't interviewed them yet to find out what they want. Well, how about if you start with this, that you treat to know, within yourself, you treat to know within yourself that they know within themselves that they are at choice. You got that? Why? Because we treat ourselves. We don't treat other people. I'm not going to make you at choice. I'm not going to make you know something. I'm not going to have you feel something. That's overstepping. But I'm going to treat myself to know that you are at choice. How is that not overstepping? Because you are at choice. Whether I like it or whether I don't, you are at choice. How do I know that? Because I am at choice. And we're cut out of the same cloth. I'm a choice, everybody's a choice. Everybody's a choice. And everybody deserves to know that they're at choice, because if they're at choice and they don't know they're at choice, functionally, practically speaking, it looks like they're not. Does that make sense to you? When you're free and you don't know you're free, how free are you? When you're loved and don't know you're loved, how loved are you? When you're prosperous and don't know you're prosperous, how prosperous are you? You're not. You're oblivious. You're living in this kind of twilight realm of having access to universal power but not knowing it. So everybody ought to know it. And furthermore, when everybody knows it, everybody's going to shape up. I absolutely believe that. Because when you learn that there's a power that you're using that's all that and a bag of chips, when you learn that there's a power that you're using that hung the stars and made worlds and peopled them with living things and all the rest of this grandiose stuff that we say to ourselves, all of which is true, when you learn that there's such a power like that, it makes you change behavior. You become a responsible power wielder. You've heard of expressions like responsible gun owner, responsible pet parent, this sort of thing, meaning that you realize I have a responsibility here and I have to learn some things, and there's a protocol here. I have to do things a certain way. Well, the most important protocol to learn is to be a responsible spiritual power wielder. That is to say that if I dwell for any length of time on negativity, I'm inviting it in. And Emmet Fox had a wonderful little example of this. He said, you're sitting by a campfire, and out of the fire, a little burning thing, ash, blows out of the fire, and it lands on your sleeve. He says, if you deal with that at once, brush it off, not a problem. You let it go, you look at it, you have a hole in your sleeve. You look at it much longer, you have a burn on your arm, and now you've got a couple of things now you got to deal with the burn, and you got to repair the sleeve, and so on. He says, this is how thought works. This is how he speaks. This is how he writes. These real simple little illustrations, So this is how the mind. So here comes a negative thought. I'll never get what I want. Brush it off right away. Right away. The world will never be a safe and loving place for all the people on it. We've gone too far the other direction. Everything's hopeless. Everything's brush it right off. Brush it right off. You don't have to be superstitious about it, but you have to be on guard. You have to be aware. You have to be aware. And by superstitious, I'm meaning you can say these things without feeling. You can say, well, there are people who believe that, the world is in a terrible place. Oh, God, what did I just say? No, it's like, what's the feeling that you're associating with it? We got into a big conversation about this the other night. Different statements that people make about self-identity. What do you associate with it? It's not what your neighbor associates with it that makes a difference to you. What do you associate with it? Everybody wants similar things, but not identical. So we speak our truth about these. But when something gets in the way that tells you can't have it, that you're not enough, that it's not just that you've made mistakes, but you are a mistake, brush it off real fast before it can do any kind of harm to you. And not only that, replace it. Replace it with the positive opposite, which is why we use things like affirmations. And God, these get laughed at. They get laughed at online. They get laughed at in the popular culture. Saturday Night Live ran Stuart Smalley, right? Ran a thing for years. I'll never forget when that first started, Creative Life, we were still, we were here already doing this. And I had people come to me quoting Stuart Smalley and all, like it's so ridiculous. Well, it's hilariously funny and stuff. But you know what? It works. Stuart Smalley feels better about Stuart Smalley's own self looking in the mirror and saying, what is it? I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Gosh darn it. And people like me. People like me, right? And we laugh and we laugh and oh, how silly and oh, how trite and oh, how useful. It works. It really does. You start to buy it. Or you learn why you don't. You learn why you don't. That is to say, you say these affirmations to yourself and some part of you says, now you know this is nonsense. What you want to do is sit that part of yourself down and have a talk right there. Just as fast as you would address the spark on your sleeve. Sit that part of yourself down and have a talk and say, so what about this? What about this leaves you cold? What about this do you refuse to buy into? And it will say, well, you remember when you were in 5th grade, you had that book report due, and you got up and did a terrible job of it, and all the kids laughed at you, and you got an F. And that's been hung around your neck ever since. And so your conscience, or whatever you want to call it, this little part of you that's your inner child, that's talking to you, that's saying you can't have this, can't do this, I have made it my job all these years to remind you whenever you overstretch your imagination about how effective you could be in life, to pull you back from potential humiliation. That's good to know that you have this part of yourself that you've set on guard to do that a long time ago. Don't ever. When you came down from, stepped away from the podium or whatever, when the kids were laughing at you and the teacher was writing a big F on your report, you stepped away from that. You said something to yourself like, I'm never putting myself through this again. And some kind of mechanism within you heard that and said, okay. And I'll pull you back. And so the next time you want to go out for a role in the school play, or the next time you want to ask somebody out on a date, or the next time you want to ask the boss for a raise, or any time you want to stretch beyond your comfort zone, this guarding mechanism within you, will grab you by the scruff of the neck and pull you back from it. But now we're ready to grow beyond that and direct that power in us that was keeping us safe in that way, to direct that power to now serve in some new way. And it is perfectly willing to do that. It just needs to be reassigned. So what we do is we say to that little something within us, we say, okay, I got a new job for you. Instead of being sentry around the perimeter of my life, keeping me safe from imaginary harm, I'd like you to be an advanced scout for me and run on ahead and tell me what possibilities are open. Tell me what's over that horizon. And it will do that. And it will bring to you all kinds of energies. One last thing, because we're wearing green today for 2 reasons. One is in honor of pine pollen. The other is that tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and it is legendary amongst the Irish. The belief in the little people, the wee people, the leprechauns and the fairies and the things, and that there's a technical name. Did you know there's a technical name for all that kind of stuff? They call them elemental spirits. Elemental spirits. My grandmother was one who believed in these. She was Danish and raised in Ireland back in the day, And she taught me. She said there are powers everywhere, energies everywhere. So I want you to consider that as you go forward. That not only do you have you and this conscience and this mechanism that tries to keep you safe, and you can reassign it to run ahead, but there are powers you have not imagined that are surrounding you, that are working toward the good, powers of nature, powers of love, powers of ancestral spirits. Call them what you will, all of the above, okay? And all of these energies working in and through you to create a better life for all of us. Just know that. That is the reality. And let the appearance conform itself to the reality as we go forward. Let's know together now there is one life, one power, one presence. We call it spirit. We call it God. We call it the higher power. That which is, whatever we call it, is not nearly as important as what it calls us, which is its beloved. We are the beloved, each one of us. Having an experience in this life sometimes of tranquility and beauty and serenity, and sometimes of great activity and passion and exercise. We bestir ourselves to become more, to make changes, to grow forward, and we are assisted in this by every energy of creation. I affirm and know for each one of us now that it's easy to look past the limitations of life into the heart of the sunrise, into what may come next, into what we would put in place of pain, and to fall in love with that vision, and to take up this artistry in our lives of creating ourselves as the most fulfilled beings we possibly can be. As we do this, we are assisting in ways we cannot begin to imagine the entire human family, so that everything that has offended us, everything that has pushed our buttons, is free to heal. Just as we know we are a choice, we know that all beings are at choice. All sentient beings are at fully framed choice. And each is free to shake off limitations of self-worth, stunted expressions of love and hope and possibility, free to live instead in the light of knowing, for this knowing and its manifestation in form everywhere we turn. I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
Once again, thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you for your donations. Please continue to give them, because in line with Reverend Jesse's talk today, our job is to make this world a better place, and we can do it with our thoughts and feelings, as Reverend Jesse was expressing there. And when your thoughts and feelings go into the group human subconscious, and when enough of us put all this good stuff into the group human subconscious, this world will change for a better place, and we can be part of making that happen. So say with me now: divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
I've always called it Ostara, but I will remind you this is not my original accent, so I'm not going to judge you on how you pronounce it. But yeah, we'll do that afterwards. And I'm flexing my gluten-free baking, so, just a tip, if you hang around, there are snacks. Yeah, and I think that there was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. So I'm going to, I like, every now and again I find a really good meme, and I thought this one was a good one, and I saw it, and I thought I was going to share it, and then I didn't. So then I had to go grab it really quick, and I'm going to share it now. I got it from the Unity of Houston, but I've seen it a couple of other places. It is up on our page, Danielle. So keep fighting for the good. Keep showing up, keep loving, keep giving back, keep being kind, keep being brave, keep caring, keep trying new things, keep showing grace, keep on. This world needs you to believe in the good. This world needs you to believe in the good. So I'm going to step into the treatment mode, but before I do that, I'm going to, because we've got two things happening at once. We've got Ostara, which is the spring equinox. It's the official calendar that spring is coming, which it's about balance. Like, I checked my app today, and the sun rose at 7:31 and is going to set on at 7:31. Like, legit, that is kind of part of what it means. It's also about when the sun hits the equator at its zenith, which is a whole different story. You would need an astronomer to explain that to you, not me. But St. Patrick's Day is tomorrow, And here in America, we do celebrate our Celtic heritage. Because, I mean, if you've got any English in you, you've got some Irish in you. Trust me. But it's in Ireland, what St. Patrick's Day is a day of prayer for missionaries. So I want to remind you that tomorrow, have a good thought for all of the people who are out there doing that work. And I want to let you know that if you are out there living a good life, you are doing missionary work. You are spreading that love and joy of the divine. You are literally missionaries. So tomorrow's a day of prayer for all of you. Okay, so in the notion of balance, in the notion of Ostara, in the notion of springtime, in the notion of life bursting forth, because I don't know if you've noticed the trees. The trees are bursting forth, and the birds have really been bursting forth with song. It's been gorgeous in the morning to listen to them. I want you to consciously step with me into the sacred. It's all sacred all the time. But when we do it consciously, when we consciously unite with the one, that is when we are at our most powerful. So I invite you to know with me the one life, the one presence, the one power, the one love. And in knowing of the one, knowing that the sum is greater than its parts, that we are all those parts, that we live that life, that we are that presence, that we are the channels for that love. And when we remember that, when we remember thou art that, when we practice the me with a capital M, amazing things happen. And so I'm knowing as we walk through this week, as we step into that space of prayer for the people doing the divine's work, as we celebrate our Celtic heritage, as we celebrate the power of spring, the bursting forth of new ideas, of new love, of new projects, of new things, that we remember the balance, that we remember that there's always going to be enough. Enough love, enough presence, enough kindness, enough care, enough goodness, because we are that. We are that. And I know this with all of the amazement in my soul and the gratitude. I am grateful for a teaching that teaches me who I am. I am grateful for a community that comes together to remind each other of who we are. Beloved expressions of the divine. I am grateful for our ministers, our practitioners, our amazing musicians. I am grateful for the technology that sends this out into the ether and lets you come back to it at any time, because you know you want to hear that one again. And I'm grateful for each and every one of you. And I am grateful because gratitude is just another word for love. And I relax into that knowing of love, kindness, caring, goodness, divinity, and release my word with love into the law, knowing that it is done. And so it is.
Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me. I feel it in my body. I feel it in my mind. I feel it in everything I am. I choose it. I trust it. I use it. And I love it. And so it is. Shlanta. Happy St. Patrick's Day.